The young writers galloped across ABC for 3 seasons, and today, two of these young stars are gone, one at just 24. From a future Oscar winner to a global movie star, here is what happened to every writer, and where two of them finally came to rest. Number 1 is the actor whose life cracked open one day after his 27th birthday. Josh Brolin had just turned 27 when his mother, Jane Cameron Agee, drove her car into a tree in California and died at 55. She had left him a voicemail only hours earlier, laughing at his joke answering machine, and that laugh became the last thing he ever heard from her. Grief like that reshapes a person, and Brolin carried it into everything that came after. On The Young Riders, he played James Butler Hickok, the hot-tempered young gunslinger fighting a reputation he never asked for. Long before that saddle, he was a Santa Monica kid whose father was the working actor James Brolin. When his father later married Barbra Streisand, one of the most famous singers in the world quietly became his stepmother. His own path through marriage was not simple. He wed Alice Adair at 20 and had 2 children before their divorce in 1994. Years later, he married actress Diane Lane, and that union lasted nearly a decade before ending in 2013. In 2016, he married Catherine Boyd, who had once worked as his assistant, and the couple went on to have 2 daughters. Hollywood spent years treating him as a face from a canceled Western. Then came No Country for Old Men, an Oscar nomination for Milk, and a purple giant named Thanos, who snapped away half the universe. Few people who watched a young writer chase mail across the plains could have guessed he would become one of the biggest names in modern film. Hickok was the boy who could not outrun his own reputation on screen. Josh Brolin spent a real lifetime outrunning a canceled show and won. The second name here spent almost 30 years as a working actress nobody outside the industry could name, until one supporting role changed the shape of her entire life. Melissa Leo won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in 2011 for The Fighter, and the woman accepting that statue had been grinding since she was a child in a puppet theater troupe. For a single season on The Young Riders, she played Emma Shannon, the station caretaker who mothered a house full of reckless young writers. That maternal warmth was not a stretch. Away from the camera, she was raising a son of her own, John Matthew, born in 1987 from her relationship with actor John Hurd. Her road to that Oscar ran through hard, unglamorous years. She studied acting in London and at the State University of New York before landing steady work on soap operas and gritty dramas. Homicide. Life on the street made her respected. Frozen River, a tiny independent film, earned her a first Academy Award nomination and proved she could carry a picture on her own. When she finally won, she was past 50, an age at which Hollywood has often decided women are finished. She used the moment to remind everyone that a career is not a straight climb, but a long refusal to quit. Today, as of April 2026, Melissa Leo is 65 and still one of the most sought-after character actresses in the business, moving between prestige television and film without slowing down. Emma Shannon was the steady mother figure who held a fragile household together. Melissa Leo held her own career together through decades of near misses, and then walked away with the highest honor her profession can give. Third on this list watched a multi-million-dollar fortune collapse into a bankruptcy filing, and then rebuilt his identity around faith instead of fame. Stephen Baldwin filed for Chapter 11 protection in 2009, buried under several $1 million in debt, a stunning fall for the youngest of Hollywood's 4 Baldwin brothers. On The Young Riders, he played William F. Cody, the cocky sharpshooter who would ride into history as Buffalo Bill. Money was never his real story. After the September 11th attacks in 2001, Baldwin became a born-again Christian, following his wife Kenya, who had found her faith before he found his. He founded a ministry, poured himself into evangelical work, and reoriented his public life around religion at the exact moment his acting offers were thinning. His marriage held through all of it. He married Kenya Deodato, a Brazilian graphic designer, in 1990, and the two remained together for more than 3 decades, raising 2 daughters. One of those daughters, Haley, became a globally recognized model and later married the pop star Justin Bieber, which turned the once brash young writer into a household name for an entirely new generation as a famous father-in-law. The bankruptcy did not break him, and neither did the loss of his leading man years. As of April 2026, Stephen Baldwin is 59, still acting occasionally and still leaning on the faith that carried him through his hardest stretch. Cody was the loud, confident gunslinger certain he was headed for greatness. Stephen Baldwin found his greatness somewhere he never expected, long after the cameras stopped, in a quiet conversion and a family that outshone his own career. Number 4 is the elder of this whole company, a character actor who was already decorated when these young writers were still learning to sit a horse. Anthony Zerbe had won an Emmy Award in 1976, years before he ever set foot on the Sweetwater set. On The Young Writers, he played Aloysius Teaspoon Hunter, the wise former Texas Ranger who ran the way station and fathered these orphans. His life away from the screen holds a rarity in his profession. Zerbe married Arnett Jens in 1962 and stayed married to her across more than 6 decades, raising 2 children in an industry where lasting marriages are the exception rather than the rule. His resume reads like a tour through American film. He faced Paul Newman in Cool Hand Luke, matched wits across dozens of prestige productions, and lent his gravel-edged voice to stages and recordings for half a century. The Emmy he won for Harry O marked him as one of the finest supporting players of his generation, the sort of actor other actors studied. As of April 2026, Anthony Zerbe is 89 years old, the senior surviving member of this cast and one of the last working links to a vanished era of Hollywood craftsmanship. Teaspoon was the old ranger who taught a house of reckless boys how to become men. Anthony Zerbe spent a real life modeling the very steadiness his character preached, married to one woman for 60 years, while the young stars around him churned through the chaos of fame. The 5th writer was the romantic center of the entire series, the face on the teen magazines. And then he simply walked away from all of it. Ty Miller played the kid, the soft-spoken orphan from Virginia, whose slow-burning love story with Lou gave the show its aching heart. Fame at that level can trap a young performer, yet Miller treated acting as one chapter rather than his whole identity. He held a business degree from the University of Southern California, a credential most heartthrobs never bother to earn, and it gave him options outside the audition room. After the series ended, he kept working for a while, guest starring on The X-Files, Melrose Place, and later Without a Trace and Nip Tuck, and headlining low-budget science fiction films. He starred in the Trancers sequels and the action picture U.S. SEALs, staying busy on the genre circuit even as the mainstream offers thinned. Then the appearances grew rarer, by his own choice. He turned toward music, playing with bands around Los Angeles and treating the stage, not the screen, as his creative home. There is a quiet dignity in a former teen idol who declines to chase the spotlight for the rest of his life. Miller never staged a dramatic comeback or sold his nostalgia back to the public. He built a private life on his own terms and let the fame recede. As of April 2026, Ty Miller is 61 years old, largely out of the public eye, remembered by a generation of viewers as the gentle kid who won Lou's heart. The kid was the tender young lover at the emotional core of the show. Ty Miller took the rarest exit in Hollywood, choosing an ordinary quiet life over the endless performance of celebrity. One writer on this call sheet never lived to see his 25th birthday. Number 6 is the hardest story in this company to tell, because it ended when he was still barely a man. Christopher Pettiet died on April 12, 2000, in Los Angeles at just 24 years old, from an accidental overdose caused by the combined effect of cocaine, a painkiller, and a sedative, with a heart condition listed as a contributing factor. He joined the final season of The Young Writers as a teenage Jesse James, the youngest outlaw in the bunkhouse, and earned a Young Artist Award nomination for the role. Long before that, he was a child actor from Plano, Texas, working steadily from a very young age. He appeared on Star Trek, The Next Generation, L.A. Law, and Doogie Howser, and shared the screen with Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves in Point Break. His comic turn in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead put him in front of a huge young audience in 1991, the same year he saddled up with the writers. Child stardom is a difficult thing to survive, and the passage into adult roles broke many performers of his generation. Pettiet was navigating exactly that fragile crossing when his life ended, his promise unfinished, his best work still waiting in everyone's imagination. He was not laid beneath a headstone. Following his death, Christopher Pettiet was cremated, and his ashes were scattered at sea off Topanga Canyon Road in Santa Monica, California, given back to the Pacific rather than buried in the ground. Jesse James on the show was a boy already marked for a violent, famous end. Christopher Pettiet was a gifted young actor whose real ending came far too soon and far too quietly, carried out on the tide off a California coast. If Christopher's story stayed with you, tell me in the comments which of these writers you remember most vividly. I read every single one. Seventh in the Bunkhouse used a television western to reconnect with the heritage running through his own blood. Gregg Rainwater, who describes his ancestry as Osage, Cherokee, Irish, and Filipino, said the role let him study Native American culture and draw closer to his own roots. On The Young Riders, he played Buck Cross, the half-Kiowa rider who endured the casual prejudice of the frontier while proving himself the equal of anyone at the station. What happened to him after the series is its own kind of surprise. Rather than chasing leading roles, Rainwater built a second career entirely behind the scenes. He lent his voice to animated projects including a Pocahontas sequel, Gargoyles, and Young Justice, then moved into art direction for major network television. He also stepped in front of the camera now and then, playing the Native American fighter T. Hawk in the 1994 film Street Fighter. His work on that side of the camera earned real recognition. He served 3 seasons as an art director on America's Got Talent and worked on an American Idol charity special, a contribution that brought him a Primetime Emmy nomination, a distinction his on-camera career never delivered. Music stayed close to him too, and he toured England at one point with a youth chorale, a reminder that his talents ran well beyond acting. As of April 2026, Gregg Rainwater is 60 years old, having quietly reinvented himself as a respected craftsman in an industry that first hired him only for his face. Buck Cross was the outsider forced to prove he belonged in every room he entered. Gregg Rainwater proved the same thing off-screen, earning an Emmy nomination for work the audience never even saw. Number 8 broke a genuine color barrier in American television, and most viewers never realized they were watching history. Don Franklin became the first black actor to co-star in a United States television western when he joined The Young Riders in its second season. He played Noah Dixon, a freeborn African-American who rode for the Pony Express alongside the others, a character written with a dignity the genre had long denied performers who looked like him. His journey to that role began far from Hollywood. Franklin trained as a dancer and stage actor in Chicago, earning a Best Actor nomination in the city's respected Jefferson Awards before television ever called. That theatrical grounding gave his screen work a discipline that carried him for decades. After the writers disbanded, he found his most famous role commanding a submarine. From 1993 to 1996, he played Commander Jonathan Ford on SeaQuest DSV, the ambitious undersea science fiction series, and later starred in 7 Days. His career simply kept going, moving through Bosch, SEAL Team, Insecure, and Girlfriends, and dozens of other productions across 4 decades. Deep into the 2000s and beyond, he kept turning up in acclaimed series, a rare feat for an actor whose first big role landed back in the 1980s. As of April 2026, Don Franklin is 65 years old and still working steadily, one of the most durable actors this cast produced. Noah Dixon was the writer who carried the weight of representing more than himself on the frontier. Don Franklin carried a real historical first on his shoulders, quietly opening a door in a genre that had kept it shut for generations. If you are enjoying these stories, take a second to subscribe so the next cast retrospective finds you. It genuinely helps this channel keep going. The 9th name walked away from acting to fly commercial jets, and then came back to become an award-winning filmmaker. Travis Fine enrolled in flight school in 2002 and was soon working as a first officer flying regional jets, a career pivot almost unheard of for a former television regular. On The Young Riders, he played Ike McSwain, the bald, mute rider who spoke in sign language and shared a deep bond with Buck. Playing a character with no spoken lines demanded a physical, expressive kind of acting, and it seems to have pointed Fine toward storytelling from behind the lens. After his years in aviation, He returned to the industry not as a performer, but as a writer and director. His defining work arrived in 2012. He co-wrote, produced, and directed Any Day Now, a drama set in the 1970s starring Alan Cumming, a film he made alongside his wife Christine, and one that won audience awards at festivals around the world. His personal life had its turns as well. A first marriage in 1993 ended in divorce 2 years later, and in 2002 he married Christine, with whom he raised 3 children. As of April 2026, Travis Fiennes is 57 years old, established as a respected independent filmmaker whose second act eclipsed his first. Ike was the writer who could not speak yet said everything through his hands and his eyes. Travis Fiennes spent a real life finding new ways to tell stories, first from the cockpit of a jet and finally from the director's chair. Number 10 fought a private battle for 10 months before it took her, far from the cameras that once made her a series lead. Yvonne Suhor died on September 27, 2018, at 56, at her home in Orlando, Florida, 10 months after a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. On The Young Riders, she played Louise McLeod, the young woman who disguised herself as a man to ride for the Pony Express and slowly let the kids see who she really was. Her life after the series moved away from Hollywood and toward teaching. A New Orleans native with a graduate degree from the University of Southern California, Suhor guest-starred on Murder, She Wrote, Star Trek, Voyager, and an award-winning episode of Northern Exposure before finding her true calling. Long before Hollywood, she had trained hard on stage, playing Rose of Sharon in the Steppenwolf Theater production of The Grapes of Wrath. From 1997 until her death, she ran Art's Seke Film Acting Studio in Orlando, shaping a new generation of performers and pouring into her students the craft she had spent a career mastering. Many of them remembered her not as a television star but as the teacher who believed in them. Her passing came quietly, at home, surrounded by the life she had built well outside the spotlight. Public records do not disclose a cemetery or a final resting place, and her family kept that detail private, so the specific ground where she was laid to rest remains unknown to the public. Lou was the girl who hid her true self behind a disguise just to be allowed to ride. Yvonne Suhor spent her last 20 years dropping every disguise, teaching young actors to find the truth in themselves. 11th on this list was born into one of the wealthiest oil dynasties in Texas history and chose to earn his own living as a working actor instead. Brett Cullen came from the famous Cullen oil family of Houston, a name tied to one of the great fortunes of the American oil boom, yet he built a 5-decade career on his own craft rather than his inheritance. On The Young Riders, he played Marshal Sam Kane, the lawman of Sweetwater who fell in love with and married the caretaker Emma. His career became a masterclass in the durable working actor. Cullen graduated from the University of Houston and moved steadily through prestige television for 40 years, playing Dan Fix on Falcon Crest, a governor on The West Wing, and the doomed Goodwin on Lost. Audiences knew his face in 100 roles without ever quite learning his name. Film kept calling too. He appeared in major pictures across the decades, including a memorable turn as Thomas Wayne in the 2019 blockbuster Joker, sharing scenes at the heart of one of the biggest movies of its year. As of April 2026, Brett Cullen is 69 years old and still active, one of the most reliably employed character actors of his entire generation. Sam Kane was the frontier lawman who brought order to a lawless town. Brett Cullen walked away from an oil fortune to chase order of a different kind, a life measured in roles honestly earned, rather than money simply inherited. The final writer reached the middle of a rising television career and then chose, deliberately, to leave it all behind for her children. Claire Wren stepped away from acting in the mid-2000s to become a full-time mother, closing a nearly 2-decade career at a point when many performers cling to every remaining credit. On The Young Riders, she played Rachel Dunn, the caretaker who replaced Emma and became a steady presence for the writers in the show's later seasons. Her road to that role was shaped by an athlete's discipline and an early loss. Wren trained seriously as a gymnast in her youth until a knee injury in her senior year of high school ended that path, sending her toward theater and a psychology degree at Southern Methodist University instead. Across her career, she gathered credits on Law and Order, NYPD Blue, and JAG, building the kind of respectable working resume that keeps an actor employed for years. Then she married actor William Russ, had 2 children, and decided her family mattered more than the next audition. As of April 2026, Claire Wren is 63 years old, long retired from the screen, and by every public account, content with the choice she made. Rachel Dunn was the caretaker who put a house of young writers ahead of herself. Claire Wren did exactly the same in real life, trading a working actress's career for the family she wanted more, and never once looking back. 2 writers rest now off a California tide and behind a private Orlando door, while the rest ride on, scattered across a country their show only pretended to cross.